Your life journey doesn't stand still, and neither should your wealth. Welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. All right, we are back. Welcome back to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. My name is Will Hoffman, founder and president of Hoffman Wealth Management, and your host.
And I am Brynn Tarbuck, your co-host.
How you been, Brynn?
Been doing good. We've had a couple of kind of nice days. Sun's been peeking through, so a little change from what we talked about.
50 degrees in February, we'll take it, right?
I will take it. Yep, I feel like we're getting there, slowly but
heat's
surely.
Coming. Speaking of heat, we're talking about fire.
Yep.
We're talking about the financial independence and retire early movement, continuing our conversation about ways to achieve fire, the path to financial independence. And today we're going to talk about one of the more, confusing topics, and one of the more, if confusing is the right word, maybe more sensitive, is how to do so through equity compensation. And when we talk about equity compensation, what we mean are things like RSUs and RSAs, which are restricted stock units and restricted stock awards. We'll talk about the difference there and some things that you can do to achieve financial independence. But, when you go to work for a company and they are paying you in shares of the company or stock, the hope is, and the anticipation is, at some point in time, you're going to be able to sell those or execute those units at a profit and be able to, maybe use that to retire early, because they have different tax implications and different opportunities than a traditional retirement plan. So they can allow you to retire before that magic age of 59 and a half, when the IRS says, now you can have your retirement money. But they can be confusing, and they're confusing for a lot of reasons. One, every company treats them different. Every situation is different. And two, our individual situations are different. So they can be a little confusing as we migrate through this FIRE movement.
Yeah, I don't think confusing is a bad word at all, because we had a brief conversation before recording, and I got to the point where I said, okay, get a piece of pen. You need a pen and paper, and you need to start drawing this out, because there's a lot that goes into it, and if you're not 100% on exactly how your plan is, or how your employer gives out the stock, then it can be very confusing.
And working with folks over the last 22 years, and working with people that have these options, that are trying to migrate through these options and look at them and say, hey, we just had a nice run up in our share price. Is this an opportunity for me to maybe separate a bit early? And we're talking about C-suite executives that you would think would have a handle on these, and they're just as confused as anyone when it comes to executing these shares. So what we're going to talk about today are the restricted stocks and the difference between RSUs and RSAs, the situations where those typically come into play. We're not going to talk about employer stock purchase plans, because they're so unique, and different options like ISOs and NSOs. We'll leave those maybe for another conversation when we're not talking about FIRE. But when we talk about this financial independence and retiring early movement, RSUs and RSAs come into a big part of folks' decision-making. And first, we're going to talk about the difference between an RSA and an RSU. And then we'll talk about the options that you have, taxability, and how to make these decisions, and then a path forward from here. First, we're going to start with the difference and what an RSA is versus an RSU. An RSA is a restricted stock award, and an RSU is a restricted stock unit. They can sound very similar, but they have some differences in when they're issued and how they're issued. And we want to kind of nail down those differences. First, an RSA, a restricted stock award, is typically issued by a company that's in their very, very early stages. Think of a startup, a company that you may not have heard of yet. The founders have created this company with the anticipation that they're going to go public in a big, big way. And when they go public in a big, big way, they're going to make a lot of money for particularly the founders and the owners, but for everybody involved. This has happened from Facebook to Google to companies that started in the basement or in a dorm room and are now have changed the landscape of the world. There's a funny, I was a big fan of the show Entourage. I know that Ari, when Ari Gold was leaving the big captive agency that he was at, there's a line that always, it strikes me as funny when we talk about RSAs. And he's trying to get folks to leave with him to join his brand new agency. Okay. And nobody's jumping. Everybody's very hesitant. And then he gets a few agents to join, and they're worried about getting paid and the compensation that goes involved. And he goes, what's everybody so impatient for? Google used to pay their secretaries in paper clips, and now she's worth $1.5 billion. That's what an RSA is. So you're getting paid in shares of what may appear to be nothing. Is shares of a company that doesn't have value, and they're issued very, very low, versus an RSU, which is something that is given to you at a very established company, a company that has been in existence for a long time, that is giving you some ownership and giving you, you hear these referred to as things like golden handcuffs, or things that are giving you an incentive to stick around and an incentive to help grow the company and grow the company's share price. When it comes to an RSA, there's typically the price to purchase is the fair market value, where there's typically no cost with an RSU, but you do have to pay the taxes. So you're given these units, and when they vest, the tax bill is due. Both typically have a vesting schedule that you have to be with the company, or there's different milestones, whether it's when they go public with any consideration of an RSA. An RSU would typically have a time unit where you're given the shares or given the units now, and they'll vest over a 3 to 4 to 5 year period. And each set of units that you're distributed vests over that period of time. So it's a way to keep you at the company and keep you working hard, because you still have these units that are coming due. So they're not having as much fun as we're having, Brynn, but they're compensating with shares rather than, a great work environment with, outstanding clients and a lot of fun that like we have. The taxes can be a bit different. And there's some tax things with an RSA that don't exist with an RSU. There's something called an 83B election that can allow you to pay the taxes when they're issued versus when they are vested, which can be a huge, huge, huge tax savings. That opportunity doesn't exist with an RSU, but with an RSA, if you think about getting a share of a stock at a penny and it IPOs at $500 a share, that tax savings can be substantial.
Wow, yeah.
That 83B election form has a very specific process that's involved. If you are receiving these shares, I would encourage you, please talk to your accountant or your CPA or tax preparer about anything that we discuss here that has tax implications, but specifically this 83B scenario. It can be a way to save you some money in taxes down the road. It does come with some risks. An IPO never happens. The share price drops. The company doesn't succeed the way everybody had hoped, and you have paid taxes on something that can be meaningless. But if you think of something like Google or Facebook, when they have their monster IPOs, could have saved folks a lot of money when it came to the tax situation.
Lots of money, yeah.
The other thing to think about is what happens with these shares if you were to decide to leave. When it comes to being terminated with RSAs, they're typically repurchased by the company, where RSUs are just forfeited back to the company without a transaction. So you may be left with nothing that is invested if you decide to retire early or leave and change jobs when it comes to RSUs. And again, the tax statuses are different. Some, where capital gains are assessed versus income tax are very unique, and how they're executed against. So make sure you're working with your tax preparer about, when those decisions are best made. But beyond the differences, there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to these stock awards and retiring early. And unfortunately, beyond the performance of the company or the impact of the vesting schedules or things, some of these things are behavior related. And what I mean by that, they come down to our own financial behaviors and our own financial discipline, which is kind of weird because we're putting our hands in the fate of our company, but now we still have some decision-making to go through. Some strategies for maximizing these awards to think about is, one, you do need to avoid some overexposure to one single company. And it's kind of bizarre to think, because that's the company we may know the best. It's who we work for. It's who the folks we see every day. We understand the operations of the company. We understand the enthusiasm of the founders or the owners. We may also understand the faults of the founders and the owners and what the risks or the perils of the company. So we tend to imply a lot of bias to the companies. You know what I mean, Brynn, like how you tell everybody how great
just incredible. The best of
Hoffman
the
Wealth Management is.
best. Nothing compares.
But you think about that when it comes to your financial security and the
Yeah.
shares of a large part of your path forward, and you could get over enthusiastic or you could be overly pessimistic, one or the other. So you want to think about your own outlook and your own financial behaviors when it comes to that. And then when it comes to, just really sound financial advice, you could have a lack of diversification and a lack of exposure to other sectors, other investment opportunities. And this lack of diversification can really start to have a negative impact on your situation. So you want to make sure you understand your full financial picture when it comes to still including these stock options or these stock units and stock awards. In addition to that, what do we do with the proceeds? Now that the IPO has happened, or now that the big run up because of the product we were so enthusiastic about has happened, diversifying the proceeds, it becomes important, because if you want to retire early, those are going to have to produce some income. And how do we invest them? Do we invest them in the market and different investment portfolios? Do we invest them in real estate? How do we buy other businesses? That becomes, what does your retirement or your fire path look like? We talked about, having passion projects, and maybe now it's time to buy the coffee shop on the running trail that you want to own. And because your stock exploded and you want to sell that and move out of the C-suite. But understanding the path forward becomes, very intimate, I guess is the best way to say that, because it's going to be different for everybody. Do you want to stay and continue to work with the company? Do you want to move on to those passion projects? Do you want to have that lean fire where you are, living as inexpensively as possible off of as much as possible so that you can, shed the concerns of work-life balance becomes very important. But some common pitfalls, these are things that I know that I've seen over the course of working with our clients and at different scenarios throughout the course of my career. You do have to be careful about holding too much company stock. That's probably the biggest pitfall that I could encourage folks, is holding too much and becoming undiversified, or very, your success is contingent on a very few people's decision making. I know that selling those can be expensive from a tax situation, but what's more expensive is that risk not paying off or paying the taxes when it does, or a lot of things that you have to consider. But that over concentration of one company, whether it's a company you work for or not, is never a healthy scenario. Second thing is missing exercise deadlines. I know that these create a lot of confusion and add to the decision-making process that we're all kind of getting used to when it comes to managing our own money or working with, these financial products. And maybe you didn't have RSUs at a previous job and now you do, and you've been awarded them and the share prices are going up and you think everything is taken care of for you. But there are exercising deadlines that you are going to have to make sure that you are making the decision to pay the taxes, own the shares yourself, and move on, because some of these companies have blackout periods, and especially because depending on your role in the company, there's certain forms and things that are necessary because you're an insider that you do have to make sure that you're executing against, and you can't just wake up one morning and say, that's it, I'm not going in anymore, and hit the sell button. As nice as that would be. There are longer, more drawn out processes that are involved when it comes to selling or executing these RSUs or RSAs or different stock options. And the third thing is taxes. We had mentioned it before. Taxes seem to creep in every financial decision that we make.
Mm-hmm.
The taxes on these are going to be unique for everybody because of different tax brackets, of different positions in the company and different salary levels. So you want to make sure you understand the taxes that go into this. And again, we know that we harp on it. It's part of the FIRE movement. Making sure you're doing lifelong tax planning is so vital, because you could execute these, do nothing, turn in all the documents to your CPA, and on April 15th, they tell you that there is a giant tax bill due. And yeah, money's been spent. Money's been committed to another business, another project, and now you have a big tax bill. So making sure that these are included in the financial planning conversation from the onset, from the time that you're awarded these, from the time that you start working with your accountant. They know you have them so that you can discuss things like the 83B option or preparing for what those tax scenarios are. So that if you sell those February 26th, April 15th of the following year rolls around and you've already accounted for the taxes and accounted for what the situation is going to look like is vital. Kind of quiet today, Brynn.
I know. I'm taking everything in. It's like, these are a lot of new words for me. This is a lot of new everything for me here. But no, like we talked about before, especially with the taxes and with fire, talking into your plan now, because when you are retired and you're living out that lean fire, barista fire, and then you get hit with the tax bill, you're not working anymore and you don't have that income coming in. So if you already have it in your tax plan and it's already taken care of, it's one less thing you need to worry about during those years where you are hoping to just not have to worry about.
And we are, there's two certainties in life, and one of them is taxes.
Yeah.
While it's a necessity, it's something that smart planning can help minimize, can help be responsibly applied to a plan and allow you to move forward, because, you may think the taxes are withheld on the transaction, and a lot of times they can be. You want to make sure everything's documented appropriately and you're moving forward with that plan.
Those are the two things we always say. You're going to have taxes and you don't know how long you're going to live. And that's just it.
Tax mistakes can be expensive. They can cost thousands of dollars when they don't need to. And, these RSAs are issued to companies that are hoping to massively change the world. You think about Bill Gates working in his garage on Microsoft and Zuckerberg working in his dorm room on Facebook, eventually Meta. And these are companies that they were transformative across the landscape of the world.
I mean, Apple was an Apple in a garage.
Apple was.
Yeah.
And, you remember Forrest Gump?
Yes.
Lieutenant Dan invested Forrest Gump's money in some fruit company, and now he doesn't have to work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just so much, and what's the next one? What's the next Apple or Facebook or Microsoft, and who's working on something in the AI landscape now that's going to change the maybe we'll be able to have podcasts where you and I don't have to talk. They're probably already
exist. Freaky.
Yeah, it'd be weird. Some people may enjoy it.
That's true.
But you think about the next transformative company that's working in their parents' basement right now. Yeah. And eventually going to change the world. Gosh, I hope one of my boys is working on that right now and hasn't told me about it. But, preparing for these things is vital. Sometimes we get caught in that space where our heads are down and we're only working on the project and not thinking about anything else. And all of a sudden there's a giant tax bill due. Yeah. So we want to make sure we're thinking about all of these things as we are inventing, creating, working, earning, saving, and accumulating. It's all important, and there's no one thing that is going to get fixed. It all has to be considered and worked on, and that's probably the biggest benefit of what we do is helping see through everything, not just what we're focused on or what we're afraid of or what we're optimistic about. And that's, quite frankly, that's been the fun part of this business and this career.
Yeah, there's aspects that you wouldn't even think that matter, but they do. And if you're going to be paying thousands of dollars, I can almost guarantee everyone watching or listening would much rather go to something other than taxes.
Right.
Much rather.
Yes.
So just plan ahead of time so that's have to be you.
Right. So that's about all we have today. I know that there's a lot that can go into this, and we may not have touched on something that is specific to your company or specific to the units that you have or the awards that you've received. But, please feel free to reach out, if not to us, to somebody to get some advice or to get just help on these, because, we'd hate to see all that effort, all that ingenuity, become a missed opportunity. And that's why we do the podcast. That's why it's Wealth on the Move, because we know we're creating and we're innovating and we're changing the world, and we want to make sure it's done smartly so we can enjoy the fruits of all that labor and all that ingenuity.
Absolutely, as you should after all those years of working.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, any questions? Our website's the best way to reach us, hoffmanwealth.com. Very active on LinkedIn. Chat me up if you do have any questions, but make sure that you're getting these things taken care of.
Yes. Thank you guys for listening today. As always, keep your plan and your wealth moving along, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hoffman Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.